You know that moment when your entire world crumbles in 3 seconds? When everything you believe to be true reveals itself as the most elaborate lie you've ever lived? Well, I'm about to tell you exactly what that feels like, because it happened to me at Gate 47 of Denver International Airport on what should have been the happiest day of my life. My name is Sally, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was married to David for 8 wonderful years. We were that couple that finished each other's sentences, shared inside jokes, and still held hands walking down the street. My best friend since childhood, Emma, was the third piece of our perfect puzzle. She was my maid of honor, the godmother to the children we planned to have, and the person I called when I needed to vent about anything, including David, ironically enough. The three of us were inseparable. Holidays together, vacations as a trio when one of us was single, and group chats that pinged constantly throughout the day. David worked as a software engineer, requiring frequent travel. Emma was a marketing executive who also traveled for work. I was a freelance graphic designer with the flexibility to work from anywhere, a blessing that would later become a curse. Everything seemed perfect. David would return from business trips with little gifts and stories about boring conference rooms. Emma would come back from campaigns with hilarious tales of difficult clients. We'd laugh together over dinner, sharing our lives like the tight-knit family we'd chosen to become. But perfection, as I learned, is often just an illusion carefully maintained by people who have something to hide. The first crack in my perfect world appeared about a year ago, though I didn't recognize it at the time. David started traveling more frequently for work, sometimes twice a month instead of quarterly. When I mentioned it seemed excessive, he'd get defensive, explaining that his company was expanding and needed his expertise in multiple markets. It made sense. His career was thriving. Around the same time, Emma's schedule became increasingly demanding. She'd cancel our weekly coffee dates, postpone girls' nights, and seemed distracted during calls. When I expressed concern about her stress levels, she'd brush it off, claiming her new role required more focus. I worried about her burning out, but I respected her ambition. What I didn't realize was that their busy schedules were synchronized in ways that had nothing to do with work. The second crack appeared during David's birthday last year. I'd planned a surprise party with all our friends, specifically asking Emma to help coordinate since she knew David's preferences almost as well as I did. But when the day arrived, Emma called in sick with what she claimed was food poisoning. David seemed more disappointed than I would have expected for a friend's absence. Later, while cleaning up, I found David checking his phone obsessively. When I asked if everything was okay, he said he was worried about Emma and was checking if she needed anything. It struck me as sweet at the time, this concern for my best friend. Now I realize he was probably coordinating their story. The third crack happened during our 8th wedding anniversary 3 months ago. David had planned what he called a surprise romantic getaway to Napa Valley, but 2 days before we were supposed to leave, he received an emergency work call requiring him to fly to Seattle instead. He was devastated, apologetic, and promised to make it up to me. Emma, being the amazing friend I thought she was, offered to take David's place so I wouldn't have to go alone. "Girls' weekend in wine country," she said, with that bright smile I now realize was perfectly practiced. "It'll be even better than a romantic getaway." And it was wonderful. Emma was attentive, present, and genuinely excited to be there. We talked about everything: our dreams, fears, relationships. I even confided concerns I'd been having about David's increased travel and seeming distraction. She listened sympathetically, offered reassurance, and made me feel silly for doubting my marriage. What I didn't know was that David hadn't gone to Seattle for work. He'd gone to San Francisco, where Emma was supposedly attending a marketing conference that same weekend. While I poured my heart out to her about my marriage, she was mentally planning her next rendezvous with my husband. The fourth crack was so subtle, I almost missed it entirely. During a casual dinner 6 weeks ago, Emma mentioned a new sushi place she'd tried, describing the atmosphere and recommending specific dishes in detail. David's face lit up with recognition, and he started to say something about the place before catching himself and changing the subject abruptly. Later, when I asked him about it, He claimed he'd just read reviews online and was interested in trying it. But something about his reaction felt off. The way he'd started to speak with such familiarity, then suddenly stopped. It was like watching someone catch themselves before revealing a secret. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to shake the feeling that I was missing something important. But every time I tried to piece together my suspicions, they seemed ridiculous. David and Emma were the two people I trusted most in the world. The fifth and final crack came 2 weeks ago. David had been in Chicago for what he said was a 3-day conference. On the second night, I called him around 9 p.m. to chat before bed. He answered, but there was something strange about the background noise. It wasn't hotel room silence or conference chatter. It sounded like a restaurant, with soft music and the clink of glasses. When I asked where he was, he said he was in his hotel room ordering room service. But room service doesn't come with live jazz music and other diners' conversations. When I pointed this out, he claimed the hotel had thin walls and there was a restaurant next door. It was plausible, but something in his voice told me he was lying. That same night, I checked Emma's social media out of curiosity. She'd posted a photo of an elaborate dinner with the caption, "Business dinner in the Windy City." Chicago, the Windy City. David was in Chicago, Emma was in Chicago, and suddenly all those little cracks began forming a picture I couldn't unsee. But still, I told myself I was being paranoid. People traveled to the same cities for work all the time. It was a coincidence. It had to be. Except now, as I stood in Denver International Airport, watching my husband of 8 years holding hands with my best friend of 25 years, I realized that some coincidences are too deliberate to be anything but lies. But I told myself I was being paranoid until 3 days before that airport encounter, when David called me with what I thought was the most romantic gesture ever. "I have a surprise planned for your birthday," he said, his voice warm with excitement. "A long weekend in Denver. I found this amazing mountain resort about an hour outside the city. We could go hiking, visit hot springs, maybe even try that couples massage you've been talking about." I was thrilled. It had been months since we'd taken a proper vacation together. Between his work travel and my project deadlines, we'd been like ships passing in the night. A romantic getaway sounded perfect. "There's just one catch," he continued, and I could hear him smiling through the phone. "I want it to be a complete surprise. I've already booked everything, but I want you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" Of course I could. This was David, the man who'd surprised me with tickets to see my favorite band, who'd secretly learned to make my grandmother's apple pie recipe, who'd once driven 4 hours to find the specific tulips I'd mentioned loving. His surprises were always thoughtful and perfect. He said, "I'll text you the flight details, just pack for mountain weather and outdoor activities. And Sally, I love you so much. I can't wait to see your face when you realize what I've planned." The flight information arrived an hour later. I was to fly from Portland to Denver on Friday afternoon, and he'd pick me up at the airport. The return flight was scheduled for Monday evening. A perfect long weekend, just like he'd promised. I spent the next 3 days in excited anticipation. I bought new hiking boots, packed my favorite sundresses for dinners out, and even splurged on new lingerie for what I hoped would be romantic evenings. When I told Emma about the surprise trip, she was genuinely excited for me. "That's so sweet of David," she said during our Thursday night phone call. "You two deserve some quality time together. I'm actually traveling this weekend too, heading to Denver for a last-minute client meeting. What are the odds?" What are the odds indeed? "Maybe we'll run into each other at the airport," I joked, not knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be. Ha, that would be funny. But knowing David, he's probably planned every minute of your trip. You'll be too busy being swept off your feet to notice anyone else. She was right about one thing. I was completely swept up in anticipation. I barely slept Thursday night, too excited about the romantic surprise waiting for me. Friday morning, I woke up early and spent extra time getting ready. I chose a comfortable but flattering outfit for the flight: dark jeans, a soft cashmere sweater in David's favorite color, and the necklace he'd given me for our last anniversary. I wanted to look beautiful when he picked me up, wanted to see that look of appreciation in his eyes that always made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. The flight to Denver was smooth, and I spent most of it daydreaming about the weekend ahead. Maybe we'd stay in one of those cozy mountain lodges with a fireplace and hot tub. Maybe he'd planned some adventurous activity like rock climbing or whitewater rafting. Maybe he'd even, well, maybe this was the weekend he'd finally bring up starting a family. We'd been married 8 years, and lately I'd been dropping hints about wanting children. As the plane descended into Denver, I felt that familiar flutter of excitement mixed with gratitude. I was so lucky to have a husband who still wanted to surprise me, who still put effort into our relationship. Some of my friends complained about their marriages growing stale, about husbands who stopped trying. But not my David. The plane landed right on time, and I practically bounced down the jetway, eager to see David's face in the crowd. He'd told me to meet him at baggage claim, but as I walked through the terminal, I decided to stop at the bathroom first to freshen up my makeup and make sure I looked perfect for our reunion. That's when I saw them. I was walking past Gate 47, fishing through my purse for lip gloss, when something in my peripheral vision made me look up. There, sitting in the waiting area for what I later realized was a flight to Maui, were two familiar figures. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It was like one of those optical illusions where you know you're looking at something, but your mind can't quite make sense of the image. David was there, my husband, who was supposed to be waiting for me at baggage claim, who had just surprised me with this romantic getaway, was sitting at Gate 47, but he wasn't alone, and he wasn't waiting for me. Emma was beside him, my best friend, who was supposedly in Denver for a client meeting, was leaning into my husband's shoulder like she belonged there. And their hands were intertwined in a way that spoke of intimacy and familiarity. This wasn't a casual touch or a friendly gesture. This was the way lovers hold hands. I stood there, frozen, watching them with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. They were completely absorbed in each other, talking quietly and laughing at private jokes. Emma would occasionally brush David's hair back from his forehead in a gesture so tender, so possessive, that it made my stomach turn. David would lean down to whisper something in her ear, and she'd giggle like a teenager with her first crush. They looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy, in a way that made my heart shatter into a million pieces. Because I recognized that happiness. It was the same joy I'd seen on David's face when he'd proposed to me 8 years ago. It was the same contentment I'd witnessed between us during our honeymoon. It was the happiness of two people completely in love. Except, this time, that happiness didn't include me. As I watched, an announcement came over the airport speakers. Now boarding flight 1247 to Maui. We'll begin with first class and our premium members. David and Emma both stood up, gathering their carry-on bags with the practiced efficiency of people who'd traveled together before. Emma was wearing a flowing sundress and sandals, vacation clothes. David had on khaki shorts and a linen shirt, also vacation attire. They weren't dressed for business meetings or conferences. They were dressed for paradise. The romantic surprise weekend David had planned wasn't for me. It was for them, and I was never supposed to find out about it. The cruelest part was realizing that my presence at the airport wasn't coincidence. It was orchestration. David had sent me to Denver knowing Emma would meet him there, knowing they'd fly off together while I waited at baggage claim for a husband who would never arrive. What was his plan? To call me hours later with some fabricated emergency? To leave me stranded in a strange city while he enjoyed a romantic getaway with my best friend? I watched them walk toward the boarding gate, their fingers still intertwined, their faces glowing with anticipation. And that's when the full weight of my betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a recent development or a moment of weakness. The way they moved together, the familiarity of their touches, the synchronized rhythm of their steps, this was a well-established relationship. They'd been together for months, maybe even years. Every business trip, every canceled dinner, every late-night phone call suddenly made perfect sense. They'd been living a parallel life together while I'd been living a lie. And the most devastating part? They'd been using me as their cover story, their alibi, their unwitting accomplice in their deception. As they disappeared down the jetway to board their flight to paradise, I stood there in the middle of Denver International Airport, surrounded by hundreds of travelers, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Flight delayed in Phoenix. We'll be about 2 hours late picking you up. So sorry, sweetheart. Grab some coffee and I'll be there as soon as I can. Love you." The lie was so casual, so practiced, that it made me physically ill. While I'd been watching him board a plane to Maui with my best friend, he'd been sending me fabricated excuses for his absence. The level of deception was breathtaking in its cruelty. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through our recent text messages, suddenly seeing them with new eyes. Every "stuck in meetings," every "flight canceled," every "miss you too," took on a sinister new meaning. How long had he been lying to me with such ease? Another text came through, this one from Emma. "Have fun on your romantic getaway. David is such a keeper. Can't wait to hear all about it when you get back. Love you, girl." The audacity of it took my breath away. She was literally on a plane with my husband, flying to a tropical paradise for what was clearly a well-planned romantic vacation, and she was texting me about what a great guy he was. The psychological manipulation was so sophisticated, so calculated, that I almost had to admire its thoroughness. That's when the anger hit me. It started as a small flame in my chest, but within seconds, it had spread through my entire body like wildfire. I wasn't just angry, I was furious. Furious at their deception, furious at my own blindness, but most of all, furious at how they'd used my love and trust as weapons against me. I booked a hotel room and started investigating. Credit card statements showed romantic restaurant charges on dates when David claimed boring business dinners. Hotel bookings in cities where they supposedly traveled separately. David's shared Google Drive contained photos from their trips, intimate text conversations, and house listings in cities where neither of us lived. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a life together. Instead of confronting them immediately, I decided to disappear. I rented a car and drove to Breckenridge, paying cash for everything. Let them wonder where I was. I sent David a text. "Client emergency, had to fly back early. Don't worry about picking me up." To Emma, "Denver trip cut short, client crisis. Rain check on hearing about your meeting." I spent the weekend hiking alone in the mountains, thinking about my life. For the first time in months, I felt truly free. Meanwhile, David and Emma were probably toasting their successful deception in Maui. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they celebrated their betrayal, I was discovering genuine independence. Saturday evening brought concerned texts. David, "Hope your client emergency is going well. Missing you already." Emma, "Hope work stuff gets sorted out quickly. Hawaii is amazing. Wish you could see it." Hawaii. She couldn't resist mentioning it, even though she was supposed to be in Denver. Sunday brought more messages, slightly panicked. I responded briefly, creating just enough distance to make them uncomfortable. Monday, David called while they were probably on their return flight. I answered when I calculated Emma might be sitting next to him. "This client situation has been a nightmare," I said, making my voice tired. "I am extending my trip through Wednesday. This could be huge for my business." I miss you," he said, his voice tight. The audacity almost made me laugh. He'd spent the weekend in paradise with my best friend, telling me he missed me. I'll be home Wednesday night. We can have a long talk then. I have a lot to tell you. Wednesday evening, I returned home to find David anxious and guilty. I played the loving wife perfectly, asking about his boring Phoenix meetings, while he described his romantic Hawaii vacation as conference rooms and bad coffee. Thursday's coffee with Emma was the ultimate test. She glowed like someone who'd had a wonderful weekend, describing her Denver business meetings with carefully crafted lies about salmon dinners and fascinating marketing people. When she mentioned wishing I could have experienced Denver with her, I almost laughed. She'd experienced it with someone, all right. Friday morning, I woke up with absolute clarity. No more games. No more pretending. While David showered, I placed all my evidence in a folder on the kitchen counter next to his coffee mug. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, proof of their 18-month affair, organized chronologically. When David emerged and saw the folder, his face went through confusion, recognition, then panic. "Open it," I said calmly. His hands shook as he flipped through the pages. "Sally, I can explain." "No. You've done enough explaining. 18 months of creative storytelling. I'm done listening. How long have you known?"
Since Friday. Since I saw you and Emma boarding a plane to Maui while I waited for you at baggage claim. He sank into his chair. You were at the airport? Your romantic surprise weekend was quite a surprise, just not the kind you intended. I placed divorce papers on the table. I've already signed them. My lawyer will be in touch. Sally, please, can't we work through this? Work through what? Your affair? Your lies? The fact that you tried to use me as a decoy while you vacationed with my best friend? My phone buzzed. Emma, coffee again today? I showed David the message. Should I tell her I'm busy divorcing my husband who's been sleeping with her for 18 months? Please don't involve Emma. Emma involved herself when she decided to sleep with my husband. I picked up my suitcase. I don't want the house, alimony, or anything that ties me to this situation. I just want out. Where are you going? Away. Far away from both of you. I looked at him one last time. I hope it was worth it. I hope she makes you happy. But remember this moment every time you look at her, because she'll always be the woman you destroyed your marriage for. I walked out and didn't look back. My phone started ringing before I reached my car. I blocked both their numbers and all their social media. The Sally who would have answered those calls, who would have tried to understand their perspective, that woman had died at gate 47. As I drove toward my new life in Seattle, I wasn't afraid of the future. For the first time in months, I was excited about it. I'd learned I was stronger than I'd imagined, more capable than I'd been tested to be, and deserving of so much more than I'd been accepting. The woman driving toward Seattle was someone new entirely, someone who discovered her own strength in the ashes of their betrayal, someone who was finally truly free. Did you like this content? Then subscribe to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos, leave a like, and share with anyone who needs to reflect on these family challenges. Together, we can transform our relationships.